So, good morning, maybe good afternoon, maybe good evening. My name is Karin Elena Sanchez, and on behalf of Malins Publishing from Slovenia, I'm welcoming you to our roundtable discussion on new technologies and author rights. The objective of this roundtable is to explore the impact of new technologies on the creative industry and the challenges that authors and publishers face in the digital age. Furthermore, we want to understand benefits, advantages, risks, and opportunities of artificial intelligence and authors' rights. We are also going to discuss the importance of protecting authors' rights and intellectual property in the digital era. Our esteemed guests today are two gentlemen, Javier Diaz de Olarte from Cedro, Spain, and Dr. Luka Novak from Sazor, Slovenia. Let me first introduce these experts so that you know a little bit more about them. Javier Diaz de Olarte, a lawyer since 1995, joined Cedro in 2006 and has served as a director of the legal department since 2010. Cedro, Centro Español de Derechos Reprográficos, is a Spanish collective management organization that represents the right of authors and publishers established in 1988 by the Ministry of Culture in Spain. He is skilled at managing legal proceedings which aim at achieving a fair legal framework both for authors and publishers, and to develop an effective enforcement of the law. Throughout his career, Mr. Diaz de Olarte has contributed to numerous publications on issues related to authors and publishers' intellectual property rights and their collective management. He also regularly takes part as a guest speaker in different courses and seminars on these matters, and he's an active member of different professional organizations, including ALADA, Asociación Literaria Artística para la Defensa del Derecho de Autor, Literary and Artistic Association for the Defense of Authors' Rights, the Spanish section of AILA. Mr. Diaz de Olarte is also the president of the Press Database and Licensing Network since June 2023, and the director of IFRO, International Federation of Reproduction Rights Organization, board since 2019. Once again, hello and nice to meet you.
Hello, thank you for having invited me and for having relied on me to share with you my certain knowledge about the subject we are going to talk about. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure again. Luka Novak, PhD, is a Slovenian author, publisher, translator, screenwriter, TV presenter, and intellectual property expert. He has worked extensively in the field of publishing and has been involved in several international projects as a consultant. He was the director of the Intellectual Property Office of the Republic of Slovenia and is a co-founder of Vala Novak and Totaliteta publishing houses. Mr. Novak has a PhD in literary studies and is fluent in several languages, including English, German, French, Italian, Serbian, Croatian, and Bosnian. He currently acts as the managing director of Sazor, a Slovenian collective organization of authors and publishers for reproduction rights that manages the rights of authors and publishers for literary, scientific, and journalistic works and their translations, established in 2003. Luka Novak has also published articles on copyright law in several journals and is contributor to the Slovenian peer-reviewed journal Law Practice. Good morning, Mr. Novak, and a pleasure for having you here again.
Good morning from Europe.
From Europe, yes.
Thank you, Karin Elena, for inviting us and for having us in this conversation. We're very glad to participate.
Thanks. Both Mr. Novak and Mr. Diaz de Olarte are vice chairs of the European Group of the International Federation of Reproduction Rights Organization, so we can really say that we have the right experts for the right discussion. So, gentlemen, if I may, first I will start with a little bit with the term expression of artificial intelligence, because this is the term we are going to use. According to Britannica, artificial intelligence is the ability of a computer or computer-controlled robot to perform tasks commonly associated with intelligent beings. But I need to ask you first, if you could share some personal experience with artificial intelligence with your private and professional life? Who is going to start? Maybe Mr.
I think
Novak.
Javier can start.
Okay.
Well,
Can you?
first of all, yeah, if we talk about artificial intelligence, you know that this last weekend we have been told that we would finally get
Yes.
a legal regulation on artificial intelligence, in Europe. That's not fully true because there are some pending steps, but well, I think we are going in the right way. And if I'm not wrong, during these long negotiations, one of the main subjects to talk about was the definition of artificial intelligence.
Right.
So it's quite important, as you have mentioned, to state what we are talking about. My experience, well, I'm quite old. I'm not very, and I'm not I'm not a very skillful guy. So when I approach all these new technological developments, I see all of them with a certain touch of mistrust. Because first of all, I'm afraid that if I get closer to them and I start using them, I'm going to cause any kinds of catastrophe and I will break everything around me. So, of course, this is a joke. I know that this artificial intelligence has been living for us for the last years. I mean, perhaps without knowing that we were using artificial intelligence, we were already using this development. Well, professionally talking, well, we can share our experience later on. But I think that when we talk about the technology, well, it's something quite neutral. It can be good, it can be bad. It will depend on the use we develop with it. And perhaps if we talk about personal experiences, as I have just mentioned, I'm not perhaps the most interesting guy because I'm not a very tech guy. So I have approaching artificial intelligence, knowing it is artificial intelligence, because, well, for professional purposes, I know how it works. But I have not had a personal interest on it. But, well, of course, I use it. I have made several questions to the machine, we know, and I have got my...
But you mentioned with a little bit of mistrust and critical thinking. So prudency, right? Yes.
Yeah. But apart from that, I mean, I see this story mainly from a professional point of view.
Okay. Mr. Novak, should I call you Luca and Javier? What is all right?
Yes, please.
I'm perfectly fine with Luca, and we're Luca and Javier, and we know each other very well.
I know each other. So, okay. So, Luca, what about your personal experience?
I fully agree with Javier, and I don't think he's very old, so he shouldn't complain about being. He's quite energetical, and I think he's quite able to use these things. But we have to be cautious, of course. I fully agree also that we've always been in touch with this kind of let's say smart computing. Smart computing was present in the beginning of the 2000s, and it made its way into smartphones. That's why we call them smart, because they already were some kind of artificial intelligence. They're intelligent. We had Siri on the iPhones, and we had the Google Assistant. So you were already 10 years ago, you were able to talk to some artificial intelligence. Even in Google Maps or Apple Maps, you have some artificial intelligence prompting you ideas based on your searches. So we're actually surrounded by artificial intelligence, only that now it got to a certain hype because it was a different way of expressing things and getting maybe more accurate, maybe more human-like answers from the machines. So I I know that AI enthusiasts say that anything you can do with artificial intelligence, do it with artificial intelligence. I think the opposite, for me at least, is true. Anything you can do without artificial intelligence, do it without artificial intelligence. Only use it for something you really cannot do. Like we've always used computers or even small computers to do computing, like calculations and so on. So I really think we should be cautious, because I use it personally for micro editing some texts, and it was already used for translating. Like 15 years ago already, the European Patent Organization had Patent Translate, and they were using it to translate patents. So it's quite present in intellectual property circles. So I think translating is one thing, and we already have machine translators that are quite able, DeepL or even Google Translate, and we use them quite a lot. For technical translations, it might even be perfect. It's of course not for literary, but for editing, micro editing, then those texts, I personally think that AI is quite an option. But of course, if you can do it without it, then do it yourself.
Really like that sentence of yours. Do whatever you can without it. What you can't, use the artificial intelligence. So let's in a way use it as a tool. I would like to now refer to one of your quotes in one of your articles, Luca. I think you will just proceed with what you already said. So since the emergence of artificial intelligence is a commonplace that has taken over almost entire media space. There has been excitement in all areas of human endeavor. Some worry that the machine will take control of humanity. Others look forward to the robotization of intellectual work. And still others worry about intellectual property being swallowed up and spit out in some form by the black box. But what is the black box actually? When I talk to friends and businessmen and women, they tell me, well, it apologizes. We treat him or her almost as a human. We say thank you. What is this black box actually? You wrote about this, but share that with our audience, please.
Yeah, well, it's actually a complex question, because we've always been surrounded. We've been calling it generative intelligence. Machine learning was already in use before that. Machine translations, as we said, was always present, but now we call them, usually we do call them large language models, because these are machines that work with languages and transform them according to some patterns. So what the machine is actually a really, really smart computer that generates answers to some more or less intelligent questions. So there is a question of input. So the prompts, the so-called prompts that are being put into the machine in order for the machine to get some answers out of that. So there is the input and the output issue with the machine. And after that, we have to question ourselves: do we want so much progress? Do we really want the machine to be human-like? So now I would like to stay, let's say, focused and narrow, and say this is only not a thinking machine, but a very sophisticated computer that generates answers to more or less sophisticated questions. But of course, we have the question of caution. It's risky, and probably we're going to talk about the AI Act that actually regulates the risk of all these machines. So let's just call it a very intelligent supercomputer.
And a tool. The input of which depends on the output of which depends merely on the output. So the better the input, the better the output. So how you set questions, we'll be talking about this. Thank you very much. Javier, I would like to ask you about the influence, the world of publishing, in your view, by your experience lately. So because it affects every aspect of our life, that's for sure. But how it has affected the world of publishing, in your view?
Well, I work for a reprographic rights organization, not for a publishing house, but of course we have close relationship with them. And you know that publishing industry is a modern industry, and of course they have they are using and benefiting from AI since the moment they knew the existence of these processes. And but as Luca has mentioned, artificial intelligence offers a wide range of possibilities. And among all these possibilities, there are many that are good and that we can benefit from. And the publishing industry is benefiting from all these new possibilities offered by the development of technology. But now they are facing or they are concerned about what Luca has mentioned as generative artificial intelligence. I mean, these machines that can offer, and I will never use the verb create, because I think that creation is a human capacity. And these machines do not create, sorry, these machines make products with, with certain similarities externally with human creations. So now publishers can show or can notice that apart from the books written by natural people and published by them, now perhaps in a close future we could have access in the market to several text. And when I say text, I can also say music or the visual works. I think that many of us have already seen latest Indiana Jones film, when the main action of the film takes place in the 60s, but at the beginning of the film we are back in the 40s, and Harrison Ford looks as if he was 39 instead of being 80. That's artificial intelligence too. So now they know that apart from the classical publishing works developed and done by natural people, perhaps they will have to work with all these products produced by a machine. And of course, that can be quite concerning, especially because, as Luca has mentioned, to offer these products, these machines have copied without any kind of authorization, permission, and without any kind of payment to the right holders, all the previously existing works. So apart from the intellectual property rights matters, there's a kind of competition rights to take into consideration. And now, according to my point of view, the only fact that concerns them is this new generative artificial intelligence issues. Apart from that, they work and they benefit from the new technology as any kind of regular user.
What you have mentioned, and that's we are now touching the question of ownership. So it's in the digital era is quite difficult to distinguish an author from a non-author, especially when now this artificial intelligence is in content creation. So it remains still unclear who can claim ownership of those artificial intelligence generated works. Is that already acknowledged, or are we stepping into the gray zone? Luca, what would you say? Of course, we'll be talking about also that Act of the European Union you have already mentioned. But right now, what is practice? How is that in the field?
Yeah, Javier has mentioned the input side, which is very important for authors and right holders, and there is a lot to be said about this. You're actually questioning about the output side because there's so much coming, so much generated content coming out of the box that it's being now questioned all around the world whether this can be claimed as an original author's work or a copyrighted work or whatever you would like to call it. And there's various approaches There are some attempts to recognize it partly. So I think in the US there was a case where there was a picture generated with AI, and it was only partly generated by AI because the so-called prompters actually managed to claim that they were having the idea behind the whole thing, and so that it was then partly human and partly machine. On the other hand, there is a case, I guess, in Singapore or in China, where they also tried to claim ownership, and they partly also succeeded. So it's a question of how you define an author's work, because there are various approaches to this. So the Anglo-Saxon, or should I call it common law practice, is to define an author's work based on the so-called sweat of the brow doctrine. So if there was a lot of work invested, so it means that actually this is copyrighted work, so it can claim all the rights ownership. On the other hand, the let's say European law, especially the French, based on the French law, actually operates with the droit d'auteur, which is different from copyright, and this doctrine is based on originality, or also creativity. So
should be original. Yeah.
An author's work must be an original intellectual creation. So this means it is different. So now, if you take the common law principle, you might also acknowledge some rights ownership to a machine-generated work, although who is then the owner? Is it the machine itself? On the other hand, if you would take the European approach, you wouldn't, because originality and creativity must be involved, and intellectual. The notion of intellectual original work is important. Does the machine have an intellect?
Something else, sweat, or which
sweat of the brow is only based on work invested. But if you take the originality concept, which is based on the intellectual properties of some of human properties, then we are in a very, very difficult zone.
So a lot to be questioned, a lot to be even more answers and more exploration, of course. But we are now actually defining the most important things we should be questioning ourselves about. Javier, also from the field, how can publisher distinguish original work from those created by artificial intelligence? Can you give them a piece of advice?
Well, it's not easy at all.
It's not easy.
It's not easy at all. In fact, that's why it has been one of the main demands of right holders, that they have shown during the proceeding that has almost ended with the new European law on artificial intelligence. The idea of the product must show that it's not an original personal work, but it's a product coming from a machine. It's not easy at all. Even though and it's important not only for authors, not only for publishers, but only for instance, for readers. For readers, I want to know. I have the right to know if I'm reading a work, what is a real work, an original work, or if I'm reading something else, something different. Because, for instance, we all have our favorite writers, and we, apart from the style that can be copied by the machine, that's the main risk. Apart from that, we know that these works show, I don't know, their ideology, their life experiences, or whatever. And that's why we follow those authors, and we do not follow any other author, because we prefer the first ones to the second ones. But even though it's quite difficult, I mean, if we read the text, it's quite difficult or almost impossible to distinguish if it's a work or it's not a work. But on the other hand, quite contrary, we can have certain evidences showing that works have been used to make that product. For instance, we can ask to this machine, for instance, to give us a resume, a long abstract of the work. And sometimes the answer is very stunning, because we are told the main story of the book, for instance. And of course, if the machine is able to offer that, is because the work has been copied and treated by the machine. Or, for instance, we can ask about some of the characters of the novel, and what's about whoever in that novel, and the machine will give us so much information about the character, the development of that character all the novel long, that shows that the machine has already copied the novel. So it's quite difficult to distinguish if a text is a real human work or not. But from the other side, it's quite easy to get certain evidences about the previous copy of the human works by the machine.
I'm wondering you mentioned authors, readers, publishers, for example, new authors are approaching publishers and they want to publish certain work. Does your organization, do you prepare any programs or any instructions or any trainings for publishers in a way so that they can really do that, what you were talking about? Or it's just a kind of piece of advice? Have you thought about this? How can organization like yours assist different stakeholders to actually distinguish?
Yeah, for instance, we started developing an instrument that is not only focused on that, but can also be used for this purpose. Publishers give us offers as the texts of the works. We transform those texts into fingerprints, into hashes. So from every 10 words, I think, we create a fingerprint, a hash. So at the end, a novel can be an extremely long, very long list of hashes. So if you have a certain text to this instrument, you can check if it's original or it has already been published somewhere else. Well, this instrument can be also used for many other things. For instance, to fight against illegal, what we call against digital piracy or whatever. And of course, it can also be used in universities to know if something written by a student is original or not. So it has a lot of abilities, but one of them could be this one that I have mentioned, the idea of a text author, if it's original or not. But of course, you must have all those previous tests transformed into fingerprints before. So it's not so easy, and
some pre-work must be done, right?
Yeah, of course. And I think that, of course, the relationship between authors and publishers, will always rely on this kind of reciprocal confidence, and of course, that's the main column of the relationship.
Okay, Luca, before you have mentioned use creative artificial intelligence only whenever you can't use your own mind, but use it. It's a tool. You have already mentioned several things what it can do for publishers, authors, any human. But I would like to go a little bit more deeper. What else, in your views, from that tools-wise perspective, what else apart from translations, minor editing and things like that, what else does artificial intelligence can give to authors, publishers, and literary agencies? So,
well, generally speaking, there are several. If we base our thinking upon a SWOT analysis, there are opportunities and there are threats with artificial intelligence. And of course, first of all, speaking generally, I think we can benefit from artificial intelligence in business questions, in logistics, in transport, in the environmental questions, because this is a tool that is very useful in such cases, and it has been used in any kind of prognostics, weather things, and I think it can be very useful in these areas. Whilst on the other side, as far as creative industries go, it is very useful for the media, for the press, because I hear that now many thousands of articles in Denmark, in France, are being generated by AI. And of course, it's probably most of them are news or infos, not really articles. But still, they are being generated artificially, and therefore we don't know who the author is. And I really like Javier's idea that we follow authors, we don't follow machines, because we like to read a certain author because they have style, they have knowledge, and they are trustworthy. Authors and, let's say, conventional media, traditional media, are trustworthy. We can relate to them, we can believe them, and this is a question of credibility. Whilst on the other hand, we have those threats being posed by artificial intelligence, which is disinformation, hallucinations, lack of human mind. So we don't know what we're dealing with. This can be a very powerful source of manipulation, politically, societally. So all kinds of things that we cannot trust. And so this is really, a balance should be achieved, because we should have the right to know, and this is really a good point that Javier made. We should have the right to know what we are reading and who wrote it, whether it was a machine or it was a human author, because the editors in traditional media, their task is to check information and to provide news that's fit to print, as New York Times says it. And if it's not fit to print or to publish online, then it's not news. And with artificial intelligence, we do not know, is it news or is it fake?
Yeah, this is one of the most important questions in today's era, because we are bombarded with so many pieces of information that it's completely, sometimes it's really difficult to distinguish what is real and what is irreal. Do you believe that also artificial intelligence can assist in that matter? Can we ask somebody, which is not somebody, is this your work? Is this artificial? Is this real? Because there inputs that come into artificial intelligence are also provided by some human beings, and they have certain interests. So the question that lies behind is quite complex. Maybe in the continuation, Javier, let's now touch a little bit also, of course, let's go a little bit deeper. Artificial intelligence and author rights. I'm asking you in terms of your organization, because of all the expansion, because of everything what has been happening, and has your organization changed lately because of the artificial intelligence, and how?
Well, first of all, before talking about my organization, I would like to underline the importance of what Luca has just mentioned. I mean, of course, we work in the intellectual property world, and we are going to, of course, to focus on intellectual property matters, our speeches, our conversation. But apart from that, artificial intelligence has many other and perhaps more important consequences. Some of them have been already mentioned by Luca, but what about privacy? What about the loss of the ability of thinking about different opinions you've listened to, and then you can choose if you follow this one, this other one, or you are not going to follow any of them because you don't think because you think none of them is appropriate. I mean,
trustworthiness, ethical questions, privacy, yes, continue.
Misinformation, as Lisa mentioned. I mean, there are many other aspects. But well, back to my organization. Sorry. Of course, as in the digital area, any organization must adapt their way of working to the most modern available technology. And we have already done so in the past, and we are behaving in the same way nowadays. For instance, it's a very silly example, but on our website, we have a certain space where people, our members, or the people interested in our subjects, can ask any kind of question, and in many occasions the answer can be given by a machine because it's a very simple answer, and the machine has already learned how to answer to that specific and very easy question. We have both of them developing that technological tool I have mentioned before to transform text and images into hashes, so that permits many different people, publishers, readers, and even our workmates in charge of fighting against piracy locate and identify a work, because sometimes the title of the work is not shown, the name of the author is not shown either. So the idea of being able to check the text is very important. So we are using artificial intelligence, of course, and we are now focusing on many, well, not many, but on some other projects, and we think we'll be able to launch some of them in the next months. Yeah.
Okay, good experience to be shared about shares widespreadly also with maybe other countries. Thank you for sharing this with you. Luca, I would like to touch a little bit authors' rights in terms of our project, which is aimed at the minor languages. And because you're also an author yourself and experienced publisher, I would like to ask, you speak several foreign languages. Maybe if you can share with us, how can authors and publishers working with less used languages effectively leverage the use of artificial intelligence to compete in the global market?
Well, I think we're back to the translation question, partly, of course, but translating into smaller languages might become easier, although this is a tricky question, because if you follow the translating machines, you will see that if you translate from a minor language into a bigger language, then there is no problem, because there's a vast copyrighted work getting into the box without paying compensation, and of course there is a lot of material that is being used for generating these sentences in bigger languages. Whilst on the other hand, with smaller languages, there is not so much material, so the machines are slower to learn. And if you translate from English to Slovenian, you will have not that satisfactory a result than vice versa. So it's not easy. It's not easy, because we would like to actually make use of the tools, especially for translating from smaller languages also into bigger languages, so that they get recognized and they get more promotion. But on the other hand, you would also need the vice versa service. But I think the problem also lies in the machine-human dichotomy. So, because would we be satisfied to have a machine translation and not knowing it? and having a human translator behind or not. What would we do if we knew that a book was translated artificially? Would we have the same pleasure reading it? Would we like to know who is behind? So, but I think that artificial intelligence still can contribute a lot to promoting smaller languages, because they would get faster translations into other bigger languages. But of course, these, even if those texts are being done, they need a lot of editing and micro editing and macro editing.
I checked this. I did understand what they did, but I didn't like the language, because when you are a speaker of mother tongue, you could see whether it is it has that, I don't know, in Slovenia we call it žmoht.
Some kind of flair,
flavor, substance, which is quite different from.
If you let me interrupt, I also speak perhaps the smallest language in Europe, Basque. And I have had the same experience, because, well, sometimes translations are funny, odd, or something even worse. I mean, if you are using the artificial intelligence to translate from or into one of these small languages, that the results are not good at all. From time to time,
you wouldn't publish that. You would just read it and maybe understand something if you don't know anything about it. But
that's all.
That's all. Yeah.
If I may, with a lot of sophistication in those machines, a lot of translators might be put out of work. So this is also a problem, and I don't know whether the results will be satisfactory. So it's a big ethical dilemma with all those translating machines.
Maybe for another roundtable. There are many others. You have already mentioned them. Yeah, Javier. Maybe some legal and practical challenges in enforcing authors' rights in the digital area. How can they be addressed? What else would you suggest?
Well, first of all, something we are mentioning a lot of issues. For instance, and that I'm going to give you now my personal opinion. We have been not forced, but led to think about the ownership of that product. I mean, if the product of the machine protected, is not, who's the owner of those possible rights. But more recently, we have started thinking about what has been done to get that product. I mean, that millions and millions of many different kind of works have been illegally copied to get that results. And now the works have already...
We don't know all that millions of authors.
Of course.
They are where they are, yeah.
Of course. So those works have been copied. Authors, publishers, singers, producers, whoever, do not know if their works have been copied or not, but they have. So, I mean, the first step would be asking for the undoubtful acknowledgement of the right of the writers, publishers, producers, artists to have the right to license those uses of the works. Of course, many of them have already been copied, of course. And we have to look for another solutions for those reproductions that have already taken place. But the main issue for me is stating the right of any kind of right holder to authorize or not the use of the works for this or developed by these technological processes. The second one would be, of course, I can license, I cannot license, but if I can license, I can ask for a remuneration for the use of my works.
Right, yeah. It seems that you two gentlemen, together with your colleagues, will have a lot of work. Yeah.
I mean, that's that, and of course, then I want to know, as we have already mentioned, if my works have already been copied or not, And a kind of fourth step would be, well, I want you to distinguish if this text is a personal creation of its, a mechanical product. These four columns, and at least for me, are the basic, or should be on the ground of the building. And apart from that, why not the idea of asking for a compensation coming from those works that have already been copied?
Yeah. So what you're mentioning, if I paraphrase this, it's the question of how to, in a way, know who the authors are, how to license this, and how to, in a way, control.
Of course.
Control all this.
Of course. I mean,
How to supervise it.
I have my age, and I grew up under the umbrella that the author is the owner of the work, and the author must control the use of the works. Of course, there are exceptions and limitations, but exceptions and limitations have always had and have a certain scope and work inside a certain framework. But this, this brutal reproduction of millions of works is something completely different. It's not, covered by any kind of exception or limitation. Please do not accept that, because this use is not covered, at least according to my point of view. So authors, and when I say authors, I say publishers, artists, whoever, must fight to get that undoubtful acknowledge of the rights.
And this is something that you're doing also on an international level in the context of within
yeah. For instance, in IFRO, we published a statement some months ago with asking for these four recognitions of acknowledges of the rights, because it's the main. These are the main columns. I have already said that, to build the new building, because the idea of, well, technology can do it, so let technology work, or let technology go as far as it can. Why? Without any control? No, please. And the idea, well, these works have already been copied, so, well, it's not important at all. It's very important because there are many people getting a lot of money with the uses that
other people work.
Yeah, I mean, they use works as a kind of raw material to create business models, and these business models enrich these people, and the only people that are not benefiting from the development of these new business models are authors, publishers, artists, etc. So it's completely unfair. If we talk about any other sector, we would not have any doubt about the right of whoever to get a remuneration for this unfair use of their product. But as we talk about cultural creation, so cultural creations belong to human being as a whole. So there are not specific rights. So, I mean, this theory, it's extremely dangerous and extremely well led to make people think in a certain way. But it's completely unfair that the people that have created the material artificial intelligence is working with are the only people that are not enriching with the development of the technology.
That's the key sentence. That's why we are talking about those things. We'll come back to this. I was going to ask you about a little bit further. Are we ready for universal reform of copyright law? But before that, I would like to ask Luca another thing. Authors-wise, the use of artificial intelligence, what would you advise to authors in terms of, are there any precautions that are to be made? What they should consider, so that it's really a tool, and at the same time that we take all the things you have already mentioned into consideration.
Well, absolutely.
Also an author, right? That's
It's not just a question of using AI, it's a question of transferring the right rights, because authors and mentioned illustrators, poets, any artists of any kind should be careful when transferring their rights, because this is the key question. If an author, a literary author, a writer is transferring rights to a publisher, he should be extremely careful that the fine print mentions AI, not just AI, but also text and data mining, which sometimes is treated as similar, although it is not. It is a different thing. We can discuss this later. But still, when transferring your rights, you should be very careful. If you do transfer only rights for print and digital, but not just that, but also rights for artificial intelligence usage. And those rights are reproduction, distribution, and making available. But maybe not just that, also the right of adaptation, because what on the output side, you might have a completely different damaged goods coming out, damaged work. So it is very important for artists and creators to transfer the right rights. And if they do not wish those rights to be used in any kind of way in artificial intelligence, they shouldn't do it. And of course, that doesn't guarantee that the rights won't be, that the works won't be used in all kinds of unlawful ways, but still there is this guarantee that they haven't transferred them, so they still belong to them. Because if you do transfer them, then they belong to the publisher, and you're actually lost, because there is no way of claiming compensation then. So this is very important.
so. Do you believe I'm asking myself? We haven't mentioned the role of literary agencies in this new era, and what I wanted to ask you: do you believe that authors of any kind need further education training? Because the more you know, the best negotiations you can make, whoever with, whether it is literary agency, whether a publisher, because it is the best negotiation is when everybody gets what they are entitled to, and that and we ensure rightful also relations. Can you say a few words about that, please?
Yes, I think not just agencies, but CMOs, collective management organizations, are very important here, because they will probably, in the end, I mean, we both, with Javier, we both work at CMOs, I at SAZOR and he at CEDRO, and we're part of IFRO, which is an international federation of reproductive rights organizations. So we're actually, the CMOs will, in the end, will be, and this is also an opportunity for the CMOs to do new licensing, will be the ones to license those works to the developers of artificial intelligence. So the role of CMOs is, of course, what Javier just told us is very interesting, how they are approaching the problem, is also an education role. So educating the authors and right holders on how to behave and what to do in certain circumstances. On maybe a minor level, agencies, literary agencies will also do this, although representing probably a smaller amount of right holders, because in the end, at the end of the day, there will probably have to be a kind of global licensing, because this is a global phenomenon. How can you, and you know, intellectual property is a territorial right, but still, how can you define territories in artificial intelligence? So there will have to be some kind of global licensing and global tariffs also, and this will be the task of collective management organizations. So they will have to educate, and there is a lot to be done there, but we're still in the process of assessing what we can actually do and how to do it.
Yes. The question, what I wanted to raise beforehand, yeah, do you believe that everything what we are talking about, are you, the authors, the collective organizations, everybody in this world of that has to do with authors' rights, do you believe that you're ready for a universal reform of copyright, of authors' rights? Does that go together with artificial intelligence? It's a very complex issue.
Yes, yes, yeah, yes, it is. Of course, besides here in Spain, we're talking about this kind of mixture, contradiction between a huge wall, for instance, a kind of global license, and the existence of the different languages. Imagine that here in Spain we have one of the biggest international languages, but apart from that, we have around 4 very small languages. So the idea of licensing individually the rights, and I fully agree with Luca's opinion, of course, perhaps that can be possible for a very small group of right holders, of course. But for many right holders, that's a kind of dream or even a nightmare if they have to face the idea of licensing this. So technology nowadays, I think, permits us offering those kind of licenses. Of course, we'll have perhaps to take into consideration some aspects that we have not taken, that we have not considered before. But nowadays, I think that collective management would be or will be perhaps the only solution for a certain group of right holders. Of course, there will be another group that perhaps can manage the right by themselves. We must be very creative and create the legal instruments to guarantee these licenses, because as Luca has said, this is a global world, and we must try to be present, to be there in the market, because if we are not, if we do not attend that market, there will be other people attending the market on behalf of us, and we will lose the control of the works we manage. So I think we must invest, we must pay very careful attention to what's happening around us.
Yeah, you have opened a lot of interesting questions, maybe because we are approaching the end of the roundtable. Luca, you have already mentioned SWOT analysis and some of opportunities, maybe also some threats. Is there anything else you would like to add to that word of risk, biggest risk and threat to the publishing world? Or maybe you would like to add something.
Yeah, I think I would come back to the copyright reform issue. Of course, okay. Reform is a big word, and it might involve WIPO and all those big organizations. But there are, of course, many demands to the copyright world that it should reform itself, because it's sort of antiquated and it comes from the 19th century, the Berne Convention. These are claims coming from Creative Commons organizations that would like more open access to works. They might have a point there, but of course, the other side also has a point. So I think we will have to get together and in the near future or the distant future and come to a solution, because if you ask around, you will get many ideas on how fair usage should be fostered and applied to European law, to that we should consider simplified licensing, so it would be easier for users to access to the works, copyrighted works, that works should reach public domain sooner, because we have 70 years in the EU, we have 50 in Canada, and the question of moral rights, you don't have moral rights in the US. Moral rights are for eternity in Europe. So these are big questions. What about open access for scientific purposes? The DSM directive already did something in the way of the text and data mining thing, which is not the same. Then we also already mentioned global harmonization, which is also a thing that should be considered, and maybe new licensing business models based on flat fees, like an exception for artificial intelligence. I don't like to hear the word exception too much, but still that is a possibility. And there is a lot of talk about user rights. What are user rights actually? Because you always have the right holders that hold the rights to the works, but what are user rights? And the Creative Commons organizations are emphasizing users also have rights. So we will have to come together and talk about all this and with cold heads, because we have to come to an agreement, although first we have to regulate the market of artificial intelligence, and we have a lot to do there, and then reform copyright, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, it's so complex. Thank you very much for sharing this. I was going to ask you for at the end. So how do you see the future? And it's exactly what you have already said. You have to sit together, all stakeholders, and find a solution. You have already raised some questions which are to be answered. So maybe for farewell, Javier, if I can ask you, if we go down to earth, of course, this is on the global level, on the international, and also on national level. But having in mind publishers, authors, right now, because they are bombarded with so many things. What would be, from your side, a key message to them?
Well, first of all,
in terms of authors' rights and artificial intelligence, of course. Yeah.
First of all, they must remember they have the right over the works. I mean, they are the right holders of the works. And at least according to the current regulation, there's no exceptional limitation permitting this massive use of the works under the umbrella of the creative artificial intelligence. As Luca has mentioned at least twice, text and data mining exception is another different thing, and it has nothing to do with this. So right holders must remember that they have the right, they are the owners of the rights, and they have to fight to preserve the right to decide what's going to be done with the works. Secondly, I think in these next weeks, we will have at last the European regulation on that issue. And even though it's not a directive, so it will be, it will come into force if I'm not wrong, sorry, in 2026. So, and even though it's not a directive, the transposition is not needed, we will, in every state member, we will have to work closely with our national authorities to pay attention to how or to what with this European regulation in our own countries, because we have had recent experiences with other European laws that perhaps the national feeling in a country has not been the same one as the national feeling in other country. So even though the general framework will be there in some weeks, we will have authors, publishers, CMOs, and and any stakeholder or any stakeholder, any member of this family will have to pay close attention to our national governments to know how they are going to work with this legal instrument. But always, always, always remembering that the right holder, the author, the publisher, is the owner of the work, and she must preserve the control of the use of the works.
Thank you very much, Luca. Would you add something for a closing statement?
Maybe just a sentence. I think we should follow, as always in intellectual property. Also here, I think we should follow the basic principle of intellectual property, and that is achieving the balance between protection and access. Protection of works and access to them. So if we consider the authors have their work should be protected and they should be remunerated for that, and there also should be access to those works, and the regulation of this access is the point of intellectual property and intellectual property law. So I think we should follow this basic principle, and we might come to a good solution.
Thank you very much, my dear gentlemen. I'm sure that we could go on because you have raised so many interesting things. However, I can only say a big thank you for your expertise, for your knowledge, for your wisdom, for the questions you have raised, and of course also for the tips and recommendations. I'm sure that every viewer will find something for themselves, and of course there are many matters of further exploration. The future of authors' rights in the era of advancing technologies is a complex issue. On one hand, new technologies can make it easier to infringe on authors' rights, as content can be easily copied and distributed. On the other hand, technologies like artificial intelligence could provide new ways to track and manage rights and royalties. It's also possible that we'll see new forms of licenses and rights management emerge to deal with the unique challenges posed by digital media. However, and what you have mentioned, ultimately, the goal should be always to balance the rights and interests of authors with opportunities and challenges presented by new technologies. So dear viewers, dear authors, dear publishers, dear literary agencies, and other collective organizations for managing authors' rights, and any other interested audience, let me say goodbye with a provocative thought. A tool is just a tool. So is the case also with the artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is neither bad nor good. It takes a positive or negative charge in your hands. So use, for now, artificial intelligence ethically, wholeheartedly, legally, and thoughtfully. Good luck, and thank you very much for your attention.